Let's start with our motivation. And reflecting on the kindness of others is very important, and it really shifts our mind. It's also important to know how to do that meditation correctly. Because sometimes when we think of the kindness of others, we get tangled up in feeling that thinking that we're responsible for their emotions, or that we need to make them happy at all costs. We get into guilt, into obligation. So it's important to, when we reflect on the kindness of others, to really see that kindness in a very clear manner, unaffected by attachment and confusion, so that we can know that person is kind, accurately understand their difficulties and their weaknesses, and then know how to proceed in relating to them so that it's a very clean, clear, emotional relationship without attachment and aversion and guilt and obligation and so on and so forth. So it's an emotional relationship in the sense of wanting that person to have happiness in its causes, just as we would want anybody to have happiness in its causes. So it's helpful in that kind of situation to remember emptiness, and that there's no truly existent person with their own special personality there. There's just the appearance of a person based on the body and mind. And so we relate to that in a very clean, clear way, and with compassion. And in that way, we can gradually increase our love and compassion for other living beings, so that they become factors in generating bodhicitta, which wants to attain awakening, so we can bring the aspirations in our love and in our compassion to fruition, to actualize them by being of great benefit to other living beings. And so tonight we'll listen to the teachings and try to apply some reasoning to how we think. So I was thinking, give a little background to that motivation. I had received an email from somebody who said that they finally succeeded in breaking off a very unhealthy relationship that they were in. And it made me remember a video that I had seen years ago about a woman in an abusive relationship and how difficult it was for her to leave her partner. And then I thought, we meditate to see others in beauty and to recognize their kindness. And if we don't understand that properly, maybe it can lead to this kind of inability to step back from unhealthy relationships because we see the person's kindness. Yeah. And we feel, oh, they've been so kind, and I should repay that kindness. This is often the situation that, like the kids who are trafficked, how they feel towards the person who's trafficking them. They feel in debt, because this person given them a home and food and so on and so forth. And yet, it's a horrible relationship and they're miserable within it. Yeah. So it made me think, because, so often you can hear a Buddhist teaching and then you see it through your own lens and it gets misinterpreted. Yeah. So that somebody who's in an unhealthy relationship begins to think, oh, that person's been so kind to me, I need to repay their kindness, and therefore I should not leave, I should do whatever they want, etc., etc. And so it becomes very confusing, very internally turbulent. Okay? So I think it's very important, since some of us may have those kind of tendencies too, to, know how to see others in kindness without our habitual emotions of obligation and people-pleasing and fixing their problems and, being responsible for their emotions, without all of that kind of stuff coming in and creating a mess. Yeah, because this can be very difficult for people. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay, so that's where I think, first of all, the equanimity is important. When we meditate on the kindness of others, we're seeing everybody free of our own. We're not projecting attachment, aversion, or apathy on any of those people when we're contemplating their kindness. Yeah, so that everybody's kindness is contemplated equally. Not that my friend's kindness is more than my enemy's kindness who aren't kind to me at all, but being able to see everybody's kindness from an equal emotional state. Okay, so that's got to be one element of it. Yeah. And why is it equal? Because everybody wants happiness and doesn't want suffering equally. Okay. And then the second thing, the second ingredient to make that happen is a perspective of emptiness. Because so often when we reflect on the kindness of somebody or the meanness of somebody, we see them as a unique personality with a fixed personality. They're a unique person with a fixed personality, and they're very solid in our mind. We don't see them as something that exists by being merely designated on a body and mind. There's something more than the body and mind there. There's the person, and that person is special in some way and unique with their own personality, and that is the person that's been kind to me. If you see another person like that, that's when all these confused emotions come in. Yeah? Can you see that a little bit in your own experience? Whereas if we're just able to see, okay, there's a body and mind and a designation of a person, and, there's the mental continuum of that person that goes from life to life. But there's no self in there. There's no fixed personality in there. Yeah? It's not like somebody is reborn and they have the same personality and likes and dislikes that they had in the previous life. It's not like you meet them and you just start relating the same way as you did before. When they talk about the 13th and the 14th Dalai Lamas, for example, yeah, the descriptions, they have very different personalities. Very different. Yeah. So we shouldn't think of, like, oh, there's this, self-sufficient person that just picks up off of one body and drops into the other one, and, and they really are a soul because they're exactly the same. Yeah. I remember one person I met, really into the Dharma, and then he fell in love, and he was saying, he wrote me and he said, "We're soulmates." I'm going, what are you talking about? You were a Buddhist last time. What are you saying that you're soulmates? We're soulmates from a previous life. Huh? Okay. But I lived far away from him by that time, so I never was able to say it directly to him. I don't know what's happened since then. But, so you're getting what I say? If we can see everybody as a sentient being wanting happiness, everybody, as equal and just, being a dependent arising without a self, then we can relate to everybody in a very clean, clear way without saying, oh, this person has been exceptionally kind to me, therefore it is my responsibility to make them happy forever and ever. Huh? What kind of syllogism is that? Yeah? We're making some kind of syllogism, aren't we? Yeah? Is it a valid one? Yeah? There's a should in there, isn't there? Yeah? Okay. So, just changing how we view people, and then we can see, I've been the recipient of an amazing amount of kindness, and this person in this life has certain difficulties, and so I know I need to take some space from them to not get caught up in those particular difficulties. That doesn't interfere with my wanting them to be happy and not suffer, but it does make me realize, that I have to be practical and wise in how I relate to them. Because there's this thing about equalizing people. Sometimes we really go to extremes, and think, oh, that means we treat everybody the same. Okay, so does that mean that you treat somebody who's 80 in an old folks' home the same way you treat your boss? Or maybe you treat your boss like you treat the person who's and the awful. Do you treat a 2-year-old who doesn't, do you trust a 2-year-old the same way you trust an adult with matches, for example? Do you trust me to fly a plane the same way you would trust a pilot? Yeah? It doesn't, seeing sentient beings as equal and having equal-hearted concern for them doesn't mean we treat everybody equally. Okay? It means from our side we have that concern, but then we have to see what is an appropriate way to engage with that person so that if we want to benefit, we actually wind up benefiting and not, creating a mess. Okay? So, just some things I was thinking about, something maybe to look at in meditation, and think of some examples, especially when you have examples of relationships that you don't feel real good about, that are still kind of messy in your mind. Yeah, to kind of look at it this way. And okay, I asked you to write a little bit, make some syllogisms. Venerable Tarpa sent hers to me. I can read them to you. So the first one's easier to think about. Well, but think about it. Okay. Unhealthy remorse, and it is an instance of self-centeredness because even if it involves thoughts of others, still the central object of concern is me. Okay. So subject, healthy remorse, predicate is an instance of self-centeredness. Okay, reason, because even if it involves thoughts of others, still the central object of concern is me. Now, what do you think about that reason?
Too long.
It's a bit too long, isn't it?
Oh, they have long reasons if they were.
It's long because it's qualified with that first little phrase.
You may have to, qualify it with certain phrases and things like that. But, it's, okay. First of all, what's the subject? Unhealthy remorse. Is that clear in your mind what that is? Okay, you're taking it from the 5 hindrances. So there we, because everybody needs to have a common idea of what the subject is. Mm-hmm. Okay, unhealthy remorse. Yeah. If you say the kind of remorse that is found in the 5 hindrances, then maybe people know what you're talking about. Otherwise, unhealthy remorse could mean a whole lot of different things, couldn't it?
When I hear unhealthy remorse in that context, I immediately think of the stipulation to classify something as a diagnosable mental issue, which is that it must negatively impact the standard, typical operation of your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. So I would think unhealthy remorse is remorse that gets in the way of your day-to-day. Mm-hmm. And it would be on a subjective, personal level, because that isn't the same for every person, but the general understanding of it would be whatever gets in the way of the day-to-day for that specific person, mm-hmm. in my thought.
Okay. Yeah. So you have one definition. Her definition is a little bit different. Yeah. Because remorse as one of the hindrances is feeling like you did something you shouldn't do or didn't do something you should do. Okay? So it's a little bit different, you know. Yours is quite valid, hers is quite valid. Somebody else may have a third implication of, third definition of unhealthy remorse. So first thing you do, if you're going to have a syllogism, is you got to make clear what your subject means. Okay? So if she's going to deliver this syllogism to somebody, she's going to need to explain it. And then, if we're dealing with her syllogism, then the rest of us are going to have to try and think as she thinks. Yeah? Okay. Now, there may be other people who make the same, use the same words, but they mean something totally different. And we may not call what they're saying unhealthy remorse. We might call it self-pity. Or we might call it guilt tripping. Okay? So we have to come up with common definitions. Okay. Unhealthy remorse is an instance of self-centeredness. Okay, so again, we all have to know what self-centeredness is. Yeah. And then the reason. Because even if it involves thoughts of others, still the central object of concern is me. Already you're qualifying. You're saying that your reason isn't good enough. You're qualifying it, even though it involves the thoughts of others. Yeah, still the central object of concern is me. I think, what you might have to do is make some other syllogisms prior to this to understand what you mean. Because also, is being the central object of concern is me, is that always, and when the central object of concern is me, is that always self-centeredness in a negative way? No. Yeah. If I'm taking a driver's license, taking my test for driver's license, the central object of concern is me, even though it involves thoughts of others. I don't want to kill them or hit them. Yeah. But that's not necessarily something bad. What your syllogism there is probably, you've been thinking about something for a long time, and that's kind of a conclusion. But I think often, if you're going to make a syllogism for somebody who's interested in the matter, when it gets complicated like that, you have to go back and make several smaller syllogisms so that the person can understand what you're getting at. Okay, let me read the next one. Struggles with being a functioning individual, independent versus dependent in relation to others, is a wrong view rather than an instance of self-centeredness, because this notion presumes a person can live and flourish completely independently of others. Shall I read again, and you tell me when to stop according to what the subject is, okay? Struggles with being a functioning individual, independent versus dependent in relation to others, is a wrong view. Okay, in relation to the others. So that whole thing struggles with being a functioning individual, independent versus dependent in relation to others. That's the subject. is a wrong view rather than an instance of self-centeredness, is the predicate, because this notion presumes a person can live and flourish completely independently of others. What do you think about that syllogism? Can it use some improving here and there? Do you want me to read the subject again, and then maybe you can...
Well, the subject, this subject has the same problem the other subject would, which is just reading that sentence, different people are going to have different pictures in their head.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing. And struggles with being a functioning individual, independent versus dependent in relation to others. So your noun is struggles. Okay? Yeah. So struggles, okay, we kind of know what that means, maybe, but that could mean a bunch of different things. With being an independent, a functioning individual, independent versus dependent in relation to others. Okay, if you take out versus dependent, okay, struggles with being a functioning individual, independent in relation to others. Does everybody know what being a functional individual, independent in relation to others? Does that mean that you pay for your own house? Does it mean that you're an inherently existent person? What does being a functioning individual, independent in relation to others mean?
That's the struggle.
So you gave me a tip off at the beginning in that you said it was when I was in my early 20s. Yeah, I struggled with confusion and angst, having an internal civil war, that I was labeled the independent versus dependent in relationship to others issue. What does being independent mean?
I would just say it in my own version, not try to put it into a syllogism. So when I was in my early 20s, I had this struggle, and it went like this. I wanted to be just able to function and be happy, or whatever it was, independent of any other people, not have them be so, yeah. I felt like you should be able to do that independent of any other being. Happy or functioning or just, yeah, emotionally settled, whatever. And I always found that I had to be like, everything was always had to be in relationship to others, and there was no way to get out of that. And in my mind at that age, I just thought, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
I'm an
sounds funny for a
autonomous
Buddhist, but I wasn't
individual. Yeah. But you can see, even in that definition of independent, it's not totally clear. Yeah? Because, on one hand, you're saying independent in the sense that how people treat me won't change what my emotions are. In another way, it means whether my parents support me or don't support me, I'm going to be able to function in society and stay alive. So just within that thing, there's so many sub-things working. Yeah? So it's not clear exactly, which one or if all of them are what you're trying to prove. Yeah. So in something like that, if you're making a syllogism, what you might want to do is try and keep the subject, more simpler without so many components. Make what you're trying to prove. If it has many components, pick one of them. Okay. And then, then is a wrong view rather than an instance of self-centeredness. Okay, there you're trying to prove two different things. One is it's a wrong view, and one is it's not an instance of self-centeredness. It's easier in a syllogism. Try and prove one thing. Yeah? And, that's why you may need to make many syllogisms. Just try and prove one thing. Yeah? Yeah?
Being in my early 20s, like the third time you read that, I was like, it sounds like this person's wondering how to be an adult. And she said in her early 20s, and I was like, oh, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of us went through this. Yeah, I mean, it's what you go through in your early 20s, isn't it? Completely normal, even though it's, crazy confusion inside. Okay, so try and prove one thing rather than two in a syllogism. Make one syllogism for saying it's a wrong view. Make another syllogism for saying it's not self-centeredness. Okay, and then your reason, because this notion presumes a person can live and flourish completely independently of others. Yeah, is there a way to say that in a simple way? Yeah.
Couldn't make one for self-centeredness for days.
Yeah, because it says presumes a person. So already, we're not clear on what the words are indicating. Yeah, because being independent is presuming a person can live and flourish completely independently of others. Now that in a Buddhist context means one thing. In a psychological thing of what you're trying to do in your early 20s, it means something else, doesn't it? Yeah. So you can give the Buddhist meaning to that, and I think that's what you were trying to do is, I think what you were trying to do in it was have the conclusion that, I was getting all tangled up trying to be an independent adult, but, I've realized since that one is never completely independent of others. Is that kind of what you were getting at? Yeah. Right. Yeah. But, a wrong view in Buddhism? So is it a wrong view, like in terms of Buddhism? Yeah. Or in terms of something else? Anyway,
You could boil it down to
An independent I is a wrong view because such a thing doesn't exist.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that takes all the psychology out of it. But it might work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you want to try that?
An independent I is a wrong view. Or maybe it's belief in an independent I
Yeah.
is a wrong view because such an I does not exist.
Okay, subject.
Belief in an independent
I. Predicate.
is a wrong view
You.
because such an I does not exist.
Okay.
But by making that a belief in, then we have a problem. Then we have a problem.
okay.
Well,
We'll try.
or you could say grasping at an independent I. Yeah, but then what's the property
Yeah,
then?
exactly. Then you have a problem with the property.
Yeah. Yeah. Grasping at an independent I, and then how does that link up with
Doesn't exist.
it doesn't exist? Yeah.
The independent I doesn't exist.
Huh?
The independent I doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, but that trying to have the property, the link between the subject and the reason, it doesn't work so well in that syllogism. Yeah. Yeah. And then then your pervasion would be, if it doesn't exist, then it's necessarily a wrong view. That doesn't work. Yeah.
You could say a belief in a wrong view. Belief in an independent I is a wrong view because it's a belief in something that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And then you'd be able to draw those together, because then by putting belief in the end also.
Mm-hmm. So what would your property be then?
Your property is belief in an independent I is belief in something that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. And the pervasion is belief in something that doesn't exist is a wrong view.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, to somebody, we have a belief in something that doesn't exist. You're gonna have to prove to somebody first
Who believes in a soul
that an independent I does not exist. Because if you give them that thing, they'll say, well, okay, it's a wrong view, but I still think it's, I don't buy your reason. They'll say, I don't buy your reason. Yeah.
Then it's not a valid syllogism for that person.
Right.
But to Venerable Tarpa, it probably is.
Yeah.
And to a lot of people in this room, it would be.
Yeah, but then you really have to say, belief in something that doesn't exist. You have to really, show that kind of belief. You need another syllogism to prove that. Yeah. Yeah. Because also, again, the thing is, you have to specify if you're just talking Buddhist meaning, belief in an independent I. Okay, shall we do a little bit from the text and then come back to some syllogisms later? Or is anybody eager to put their syllogism out there?
Or are we supposed to do a whole bunch of my happiness is more important, my suffering has to be alleviated first?
That was awesome. My suffering is more.
No, my suffering.
Okay, let's hear your syllogism for that one. Okay.
Okay, should we start with the happiness ones or should we start with the suffering ones? My happiness is more important than anyone else's because I didn't have much happiness when I was young, so there's need to be some compensation.
Uh-huh.
So my happiness, they all just fell apart.
Read them.
Okay, my happiness is more important than anyone else's because of my seniority. My happiness is more important than anyone else's because I have a lot of responsibility around here. My happiness is more important than anyone else's because I am undemanding and have very simple needs. My happiness is more important than anyone else's because it keeps me in a good mood, which benefits the community. My happiness is more important than anyone else's because I'm doing everybody a favor by taking care of Mudita. My happiness is more important than anyone else's because I'm getting older and might die soon. And then my suffering ones were basically the same reason for the suffering. Yeah. My suffering has to be alleviated first because I don't do pain very well. My suffering has to be alleviated first because no one wants to hear about Senkei's suffering. My suffering has to be alleviated first because if other people don't do it, who will?
Okay, somebody else. Tanya, you have some?
My suffering is most important because it's the suffering I feel, and I don't know about anyone else's. My enlightenment is more urgent because I have a better idea than anyone else. And my happiness is more important because, unlike all of you, I'm never going to die.
You're never what?
Going to die.
You're never going to die. Okay. Yeah. So it's quite interesting to discover these kinds of thoughts in us, in ourselves, isn't it? Yes, you have some.
Just one. Samton's mental suffering due to frequent episodes of gun violence and family-run American federal government is the most intense suffering here at the Abbey because she grew up in a country where gun laws are more strict, people don't have the ability to buy assault weapons, and the elected leaders of the country are not actors or reality TV producers.
Yeah. Okay, somebody else?
My happiness is more important than everybody else's because with technological developments in my lifetime, I may become a robotic god. And I will smite you.
The subject, the alleviation of my suffering, is more important than the alleviation of others' suffering, because by overcoming my suffering, I can become of the greatest benefit to others. Which is better than because it's mine. But actually, I had another one where I changed it kind of to make it actually more maybe realistic. The subject, alleviation of my suffering and its causes done with a bodhicitta motivation, is important because it can increase my ability to benefit others and to help alleviate their suffering. But I didn't say it's most important. In fact, I qualified it by the importance of others.
My suffering is more important than the suffering of others because I am old, poor, and have no hair.
Jane? You have what?
My happiness is more important than anyone else's because the fruition from my happiness will benefit infinite numbers of people.
First, I tried to trick the whole thing and said, I think my liberation is more important than others because I'm self-centered. But that really wasn't the assignment.
No.
So here's really trying the assignment. When I am ill among 10 other ill ones, I deserve to be treated first because I have a precious human life. Arrogance. Oh, yeah, that was sticky, yucky, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So, was this exercise helpful to have to write some of these things down? Those of you who did the assignment?
I first tried to do it. My mind didn't want to go there because I don't want to look at these thoughts. I had quite an aversion to seeing the yuckiness of it. And then it took another go at kind of just allowing them to arise and just going, they're just thoughts, but it's quite yucky to see, or just how opposed to the bodhicitta motivation it is. But they're there. So we're going to work with.
Yeah. So what did you come up with? Now after you apologized for us, tell us what they are.
Well, I tried that my happiness is more important, but then I had to go more specific than that. So it's like, my happiness is more important because my pain is more immediate, or my happiness is more important because I'm a resident member of this community. But it came down to things like, I'm entitled to use the bathroom first because I'm a resident member of this community.
That's okay. You can make them specific like that.
Or, I'm entitled to more food because I'm a resident member of this community. I'm entitled to have more than my share of this dish because I have dietary restrictions. I should not have to take on more chores because I utilize my free time for more important activities. Or my happiness is more important because if I'm not happy, everyone else pays.
Yeah.
My happiness is more important than everybody else's simply because it's my happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are good things to see, kind of what's actually in our mind and what we have to deal with. Yeah. Because if we can't kind of admit to having those kind of thoughts, I like the one of, I'm entitled to more because I have dietary restrictions. Who uses that one in the lunch line? I think we all do, don't we? Yeah. I'm entitled to more of this because I can't eat that. So, yeah, I should get special treatment for breakfast and lunch because I don't eat in the evening. Yeah. Yeah, remember we went through that?
I know that one very well.
Yes, I remember you knew it very well.
Desserts at medicine meal, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, horrible things. Could you imagine? Put out fresh bread at medicine meal when somebody can't eat it.
Special cheeses.
Yeah, and putting special cheese out at medicine meal, and yeah. Okay, so let's come back here. But it's very interesting to see how our mind makes all these syllogisms and how completely ridiculous they are. Yeah, and yet we live by them and we die by them. Yeah, and we defend them if anybody else calls us on it and says, why do you deserve special treatment because you're keeping your precept? You get mad. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's very interesting to watch. So this is what we have to work with in our practice and kind of deconstruct all this nonsense inside. And you can also see that these kind of, quote, quote, syllogisms that we make in our mind are the cause of a lot of unhappiness. Aren't they? Because we hold this syllogism as true, and the other person is not getting it. Yeah. They're just not getting it, and they should, because it's valid, If I'm old and poor and don't have any hair, you better pay attention to me first. Okay, so let's go back to the text. Did we start chapter 7 last week? No, we were just going to start. Okay, so I think we can go fairly quickly through this. Okay, so recall from chapter 5 two kinds of statements, that there are only two patterns for a correct statement of privation. For instance, take the standard expression of privation. Whatever is a P is necessarily a Q. If this is true, the range of P phenomena must be either equal to or smaller than the range of Q phenomena. Side by side, these two patterns look like, and then you have, one circle that's both, and one circle where there's a big circle with a little circle inside, okay? An example of the first pattern, okay, in which P phenomena is equal in extent to Q phenomena is, somebody else think of one that's not this one in the text. He gave the example, whatever is a product P is necessarily an impermanent phenomena Q. Give another example.
Whatever is a color is necessarily a hue?
Yeah. Whatever is a color is necessarily a hue. That's a good one. Okay. So here he used product and impermanent. Okay, they're mutually inclusive, thus they're equal in extent, like hue and color. An example of the second pattern, the one on the right, in which the P phenomena is smaller in extent than the Q phenomena, is the pervasion, whatever is a product is necessarily an existent, or whatever a cat is a cat is necessarily a mammal, or what's another one?
Whatever is iron is necessarily metal.
Okay, whatever is iron is necessarily metal. Okay, so products and existence have three points, such that whatever is a product is necessarily an existent, but it is not the case that whatever is an existent is necessarily a product. What's an example of something that's an existent but not a product? Don't look at the book.
Emptiness.
Emptiness, okay. Why isn't emptiness a product?
Because it's a permanent phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay, so thus the range of the P phenomena is smaller than the range of the Q phenomena. These are the only two types of pervasion that can work in the sense of yielding true statements. So when you're writing your syllogisms, really look at that and, look at the predicate, look at the reason, and ask yourself, is this a thing where the reason and the predicate are coextensive, or is this a thing where the reason is small and the predicate is bigger? Okay, so that's one thing to start with, to try and see if your syllogism is going to hold water or not. The fact that there are only these two patterns for a correct pervasion determines that there can be only two valid forms of the Buddhist syllogism. From what you know from chapter 6, okay, the basic argument form coordinates a statement of equality, which is the property of the subject. Remember in a previous chapter we went through statements of qualities and statements of pervasion. So the property is a statement of equality, that the reason applies, to the subject. Yeah, the subject has the quality of the reason. Yeah, and the basic argument form coordinates a statement of equality, the property of the subject, with the statement of a pervasion, to lead a person to understand another statement of quality, which is the thesis, which should now be your conclusion. So the thesis is actually a statement of equality also. To show how these two types of correct pervasions perform in valid syllogisms one by one, the first pattern, in which the range of the P phenomena is equal to the range of the Q phenomena, is shown in the classic syllogism used as the basis for instruction on syllogisms. The subject sound is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product. Okay, so why is that one where the P and the Q phenomena are equal in ranges? Because product and impermanent phenomena are mutually inclusive. Okay? The second pattern of a correct pervasion in which the range of the P phenomena is smaller than the range of the Q phenomena is shown in the correct syllogism. The subject sound is inexistent because of being a product. Okay? So of course, so why is that one in which the Q is smaller than the P is smaller than the Q?
Because the product is necessarily inexistent, but existents are not necessarily
Products, yeah. For example?
Unobstructed space.
Yeah, good. Of course, for any sort of valid syllogism, the sign is the three criteria, okay, or the reason is the three criteria. The first of these is the property of the subject, formulated as that subject is that reason. Okay? So just, these are some really good tips for formulating a thing, because you can see in the syllogisms that we made, that we can see that, where was I? Oh, the part when we were making syllogisms, okay, that we, we didn't look at the syllogism and make sure that subject is that reason. We just said what we felt. Yeah? So we have to check, is that subject really that reason? Yeah? And then we have to see, is that reason really, either mutually inclusive or the member of the group of what the predicate is. Okay? So then he has two diagrams there. Yeah? So the property of the subject. So one is the subject sound is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product, and the other is the subject sound is inexistent because of being a product. So when you're talking about the property of those two, the diagrams look exactly the same, because you're saying, is that subject sound that reason product? So that property is the same for both of those syllogisms. Okay, so up to this point, the two types of valid syllogism forms are completely alike. In fact, for these two sample syllogisms, they are identical. Their difference in form shows only when the two different pervasion patterns are represented. So the second criteria of a correct reason is the forward pervasion, formulated as whatever is that reason is necessarily that predicate to be proven. So again, when you're writing your syllogisms out, to really see, to really check, is that reason, necessarily that predicate? Side by side, the forward pervasions for these two patterns of valid syllogism would look like this, and then we have the diagram. So here's where you had those two different syllogisms. The diagram for the property was the same, but the diagram for the forward pervasion is different, because why is it different? One is mutually inclusive and the other one is okay. So these two are duplicates of the two patterns for correct pervasions. There is no need to represent the third mode, or the third criteria of a correct reason, the counter pervasions, separately for the two valid forms, because they would look just the same as the forward pervasions. Only the words would be different. In the pattern on the left, okay, where the subject sound is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product, okay, the counter pervasion, don't look at the book, what would the counter pervasion be for that one? The subject sound is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product. Yeah, whatever is not the predicate is necessarily not the reason. So whatever is not impermanent is necessarily not a product. Okay? Your forward pervasion is whatever is a product, whatever is the reason, is necessarily the predicate. The counter pervasion is whatever is not the predicate is necessarily not the reason. Okay, it should be on there too. Yeah. And then for the syllogism, sound is an existent because of being a product. Then what would the counter pervasion be? Yeah, whatever is not an existent is necessarily not a product. Whatever is not the predicate is necessarily not the reason. Okay, so the diagram looks the same as the forward pervasion, but you're looking at it from a different way. If you're having trouble with this, when you go back and take some simple syllogisms, and that we have in the exercises that you're supposed to be doing with your partner, where you make syllogisms, and then just go through that. What's the property? What's the pervasion? What's the counter pervasion? And train yourself to see that. Okay? All that remains are the two conclusions, which are compelled by the foregoing premises for an appropriate person ready to understand. The conclusion is formulated as that subject is that predicate to be proven. Okay, that's the conclusion. That subject is that predicate. Side by side, the conclusions for these two patterns of valid syllogism would look like this. Okay, and so here you have the pattern in which the sign and the reason and the predicate to be proven are equal in extent. The subject sound is an impermanent phenomena because of being a product. Therefore, sound is an impermanent phenomena. And okay, so then you have sound, it belongs in the subset of Q, and it's also in the subset of P. Sound is in the subset of P, and P and Q are coextensive. So the sound, which is the subject, is the predicate Q. That's what the diagram means. Okay. So the only two valid forms of a Buddhist syllogism. So here he's showing, where it says one, that's the first criteria. So that the subject is the reason. So sound is in the circle of impermanent products. Then the number two is if it's the reason, then it must be the predicate. So then you have the two things for the two different kinds of reasons. Either they're coextensive or one is bigger. The predicate is bigger than the reason, and then therefore, your conclusion is that sound is, in one case, impermanent, in the other case, inexistent. Okay, so these are the only two valid patterns, two patterns for valid syllogism in Buddhist reasoning and debate. So it's real, if you have in your mind, there's the only two valid ways to do it. Yeah. Then when you try and write out a syllogism, you got to be clear about what you're saying and not add a lot of ifs, ands, and buts, and maybes, and, this kind of thing, because that you can't make a valid syllogism. Remember when we were doing the one about the guns? Yeah, and we had so much trouble making a valid syllogism because, we were having to qualify everything. And so what we wound up with is you can't really show that guns, that if there are guns, there will be school shootings, which is what we were trying to prove. Okay. Because we were trying to show that as like one cause for school shootings, whereas there's multiple causes. And then the people against gun control say, well, that solution isn't going to solve all the problem, so we won't do it. Yeah, which is also not a valid syllogism, because just because something doesn't solve the whole problem doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Yeah, that's like saying, this medicine only cures 90% of the people who take it, so it doesn't cure everybody, so I won't take it. Then the exercise, create valid Buddhist syllogisms. Then draw the pattern for each of your syllogisms until the pattern appears to your mind as the visual device. So this can be very useful. Do this in the next week and draw these things and, get really used to the syllogistic form. Okay. And then he gives the assignment, run an experiment to check the claim that even if one or both of the reason and the predicate are proven to be proven, reason and the predicate to be proven are negative, the diagrams will still look the same. So create syllogisms with negatives to see whether or not they do indeed look the same as those diagrams that we just had for the two valid kinds of Buddhist syllogisms. Okay. Remember that the one pattern with an affirmative predicate to be proven, that the one pattern with an affirmative predicate to be proven and a negative sign is very problematic. Okay. So the example there would be the subject X is a Q because of not being a P. Yeah. So it could make sense. The subject sound is impermanent because of not being permanent. Yeah, unless you wanted to count non-existence in there. Yeah. Or he gave the subject an opposite, an octopus is not a cat because of not being a mammal. That one has two negatives. Yeah. Subject and opposite is not a cat because of not being an mammal, which is different than the first one, which you only had, you had an affirmative predicate and the reason was a negative. That's the problematic one. So the subject and opposite is an octopus is not a cat because of not being a mammal, because there are more mammals than there are cats. What is other than mammals includes less than what is other than cats. So what is other than mammals is smaller in extent than what is other than cats. In other words, there are far more mammals than there are cats. Say that in the beginning, please. So all that is other than mammals is smaller than all that is other than cats. Finally, bear in mind that because of being an existent that is not a form, is not a negative. Bear in mind that because of being an existent that is not a form, is not a negative, but because of not being a form and because of being a non-form are negative, at least for the purpose of this exercise. Okay, so why do you think that because of being an existent that is not a form is not a negative.
Because an existent is a positive phenomenon.
Yeah, because an existent is a positive phenomena. Okay, so do you want to try making some syllogisms with negatives now, or you want to take it home and work on it a bit? Yeah, here he's saying, let's not make it in the subject, but you can put the negative in the predicate, you can put it in the reason, you can put it in both the predicate and the reason. But he's saying if you have an affirmative, a predicate, but a negative reason, sometimes they don't work together. Okay, and that was in that chart. Remember that very confusing chart with all those terms from Western philosophy that we went through extremely quickly? Okay. Maybe we should go back to where he has some lists of words. Okay. Go back to exercise 6.3. And let's just try doing something, but in the column C for the reasons, and in the column B for the predicates to be proven, putting in some negatives. A cat is not an elephant because it is a feline. Okay? So, cat is a feline, and if it's not a feline, it's not an elephant. Wait a minute, let's do that again. A cat is not an elephant because it is a feline. So then the provision would be, if it's a feline, it's necessarily not an elephant.
So that's the provision. Mm-hmm. The counter provision is
elephant, it's not a feline. Yeah, so that works. A chicken, okay, is not a peacock because
It came from a chicken egg.
it came from a chicken egg. That one's going to work, isn't it? Yeah, if it came from a chicken egg, it's not going to be a peacock. Okay. Huh?
The table is not permanent because it's not causeless.
The table is not permanent because it's not causeless. Okay, so what's your property?
The table is not causeless.
The table is not causeless. And what's your provision? Whatever is not causeless is necessarily not permanent. So whatever is not causeless, which means everything that has a cause, is not permanent, meaning it's impermanent. Yeah. Unless you throw that thing in with not whatever is not causeless, you throw in non-existence into that. But I think we just leave that out because then you can't say anything. Yeah, so that one works.
A chair is not a mammal because of not being a cat.
The chair is not a mammal because of not being a cat. Okay, what's your property?
A chair is not a cat.
Uh-huh. And your provision?
Whatever is a cat is... whatever is not a cat is necessarily not a mammal.
Yeah. So your conclusion is?
A chair is not a mammal.
Yeah, a chair isn't an animal. No.
Whatever is not a cat
is not a mammal.
Is necessarily not a mammal.
A dog is not a cat, it's a mammal.
Oh, that's right. Whatever. Oh, that's true. Yeah, there's no provision. Whatever is not a cat is necessarily not a mammal. Yeah, that doesn't work.
And who would want to know that anyway?
The guy who wrote the book.